Hi, my name is Andrew Broussard and I'm here today to introduce the new TDI and UBS technologies for the freestyle scooter industry. Anyone who rides a scooter knows finding a good deck is and has been one of the biggest challenges facing our sport. So today, I'm here to provide the solution. On the table in front of me are a few of my scooters and prototypes from the past 10 years, most of which were significantly influential in my designs. Now, the first scooter I'd like to show you today is from 2001, and it is actually the first scooter that I ever owned. As you can see, it's clearly broken. The head tube and neck were welded directly to the surface of the deck, and under the pressures and demands of aggressive freestyle scooter riding, it just simply was not strong enough to survive. Now, the next scooter I'd like to show you today was, at the time in 2004, the most popular freestyle scooter on the market. As you can see, it was not only welded at the base of the folding mechanism, but it was also bolted from underneath. This made it a much more durable model, but it still had its faults. The head tube and the deck were still two separate pieces and required bolts from a hardware store just to keep it solid, and there was really no way of ever removing all of the play out of the head tube. Which brings me to my next scooter. This scooter is from 2005. It is the same model as the one just shown. As you can see, I removed all the bolts from the hardware store, welded the neck to the folding mechanism rails to the deck in one solid piece. It was awesome for taking out the play, but it also had its faults. This entire assembly became so rigid that it transferred all the force and impact into the deck, causing it to break right across the bottom. In 2006, after seeing how strong a one-piece deck really needed to be, I redesigned a scooter from the ground up and manufactured these two prototypes right here. Both prototypes featured interchangeable grind plates, wood, aluminum, and plastic, which in theory were to prevent the deck from wearing out while grinding, which causes it to break. And also, it gives the rider a different feel depending on what their riding preference is. Also, both of these decks featured an entirely billet footplate. For those of you who aren't familiar with CNC machining, a deck like this is extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming to produce on a large scale. And I truly believe that no matter how strong you design a deck, all decks are destined to break, as you can see with this one right here. It snapped clean in the middle. And this one right here snapped clean at the head tube. So now, if you know that all scooter decks are destined to break at either the deck or the head tube, I have to ask, why would you ever weld those components together? If one component breaks, the entire assembly becomes useless. And if you're going to spend that much time and money manufacturing a deck like this, it just isn't worth it. Which brings me to my next experiment. This is a highly modified two-piece deck. As you can see, this prototype was still flawed. The part of the deck where the head tube attaches was still welded to the deck. And from a manufacturing standpoint, anytime you weld, you're creating a weak point. And the only way to fix that is with heat treat, which only creates another expensive, time-consuming product, which is just not what I'm trying to manufacture. So it was back to the drawing boards. On March 16th, 1976, my grandfather, Jesse G. DeFries, filed for patent number 3944377 for an interlocking joint in the cabinet manufacturing industry, which proved that a male-female tongue and groove type joint running the full length of a shelf could actually provide more support than a few nails, screws, and bolts, which at the time was the industry standard. Now, growing up, none of this meant anything to me until I started looking back through my old designs. These are the original blueprints from my billet one-piece deck, which you saw earlier from 2006. And this is what a cross-section of the deck looks like. My goal has always been to design a deck that was easy and cheap to manufacture, without too many parts or sacrificing strength. And it had to be infinitely customizable. So first, I got rid of the grind plate and integrated it into the rest of the deck, because the prototypes have shown that the deck will break with or without it. Next, I wanted to eliminate all welds, but without the welds, I needed to figure out how to attach the head tube to the deck without relying entirely on bolts. Then my grandfather's patent dawned upon me. My deck was already machined with a chamfer to allow weld clearance, but instead of welding, I just integrated a male tongue and groove interlock to the actual head tube. To further clarify this illustration, I would like to introduce the new Tunglok deck integration system, otherwise known as TDI. If you take a closer look at the base of the head tube, you will notice a small male protrusion. And on closer inspection of the deck, you will see a corresponding female groove. When these parts are perfectly aligned, they slide together and interlock effortlessly, and are secured by 3 bolts to keep it from sliding. The beauty of this system is that the female groove can actually be extruded the full length of the deck, which is the cheapest, strongest, and most efficient method of manufacturing. And it also means that your back axle bolt is compatible and interchangeable with your 3 head tube bolts. On its own, the tongue and groove interlock is enough to withstand the forces of normal riding. The bolts are merely there to secure it and keep it from sliding out. We have finally eliminated the need and added expense of the welding process while being able to offer a deck system capable of being any length, any width, any angle that a rider requires, that costs less to manufacture and will be fully compatible with all manufacturers who choose to adopt the TDI technology. Next, I would like to discuss another issue that has been plaguing our sport since the beginning, which is the incompatibility of braking components between the various manufacturers in our industry. On the table in front of me is a selection of braking systems from my collection that were, again, highly influential in my research and designs over the last decade. The first style of braking I would like to show you is a perfect example of why the old standard of drilling holes through the side of a deck to mount a brake is inferior for freestyle riding. By removing that material, you actually weaken the profile of the deck, making it more susceptible to braking. The only way to fix this design is by making a thicker, heavier deck, which is simply not the solution. If you know you cannot penetrate the sidewall of your deck, then your only other logical option is to mount the brake from the top where it will not affect the strength of the product. The easiest way to do this is by bolting a flexible single-piece lever internally in the deck, which you can see a perfect and rare example of here on a deck from the year 2000. Although this method of braking is the easiest, I felt it was also very limited, so I spent years analyzing the perfect arrangement for freestyle braking components, and in 2006, I prototyped my first 3-bolt brake mount, which you can see here. The first prototype was made out of steel, and a later version was lightened up and made out of aluminum. but still maintain the ability to hold a totally independent brake lever in place, complete with a brake bolt and spring. Since I began testing the first prototype, I've been riding some kind of variation of the system on nearly every single one of my scooters since, which you can see here on this prototype deck from 2006, and again on this experimental deck from 2008. In theory, the system could work with 1, 2, 3, or even 10 bolts, but using 3 bolts is the most versatile and customizable variation of this design, which I'm about to demonstrate with the newest prototype. As you can see, this version is slightly modified and has incorporated an entirely new rubber-like component that we will call a riser. The riser acts as a bushing between the spring brake assembly and the deck that effectively eliminates all vibration and noise from the braking system. The riser allows you to custom tune the tension of your brake spring, as well as adjust the default angle of your brake, depending on the riser's thickness. When installing this brake system, you will notice that as soon as the 3 mounting bolts are loosened, all the tension on the brake spring is released because of the opening in the brake mount, where the spring makes contact with the riser, allowing for quick and easy brake changes if necessary. Tension does not return to the brake system until it is securely mounted back to the deck. This new brake system is fully tunable and completely silent. But for those skeptics out there, we will be releasing decks with our standardized 6-pack hole pattern to use compatible flex-style brakes or even brakeless hardtail fenders, similar to this prototype from 2007. As you can see, this is a truly universal braking system, otherwise known as UBS. Now, before I leave you, I would first like to have the privilege of introducing the world to the first scooter ever entirely built on SCS, UBS, and TDI technology. This was my Mega Ramp scooter that I rode on tour for 6 weeks in Australia with Nitro Circus. And as much as I try to keep these videos factual, I just have to say that this is the best scooter I've ever ridden. And I would just like to thank my friends and family for supporting me over the years with my riding, my business, and my crazy ideas. I would also like to thank my extended family and team at PROTO Scooters, everybody who shops at Freestyle Depot, anyone who has ever visited scooterresource.com, and anyone who has ever given our sport a chance. You are the people who have funded, but more importantly, fueled these innovations. I would also like to give a special thanks to Travis Pastrana and the Nitro Circus, as well as the entire Nitro Circus Live crew for giving me the opportunity to showcase my sport on such a grand scale. To all of the above, I am forever indebted to you. Thank you. Yeah! That's a wrap.